Hi there, I'm Shannon Sahabi, and I am a PhD student in the Global Prize program at Texas Tech University. And today I'm going to give you an account of one of the studies that I've done while being a student in this program. This was completed in the spring of 2016, and it covered implementing and trying to institutionalize global education via global collaboration projects and how that enhances 21st century skills. What I've noticed being a high school science teacher is that students are very different than from the way that we were years ago and how we learned. They learn differently. And as the world today has become flattened, as Thomas Friedland would say, there are new skills that are going to be required of our students to be competitive in this global workforce. Here's some of those skills that are listed here. I'm not going to be reading these slides to you, but if at any time you want to pause, please do. And also feel free to email me or tweet me if you would like a copy of this PowerPoint. It is a shortened, condensed version of my paper and subsequent article. But the 21st century learner is, our kids are used to getting information really quick. They get on their smartphones, they get on their tablets, and they want to get that info instantly. And we've started to become like that as well. They can multitask. I know I have troubles with that. They like to see lots of graphics. So if you've noticed, a lot of things on social media are infographics, which are really informative. They like to be social. Because they can get that information very quickly, they like instant feedback. If you've noticed games that they've played, they like the ones where there are rewards. And they also prefer games as well. And they want to learn things that matter, that have meaning to them. So what may be included in many schools' missions or mission statements or visions or goals is that they want their students to be empowered with 21st century skills and be more competitive. But data has shown that in international assessments like the TIMSS, like the PISA, that other countries are surpassing us in terms of being global citizens, being more knowledgeable, and having those 21st century skills. Our state assessments sometimes are just covering basic skills and not those that will be needed later in life. So one of the solutions to this problem of students being behind in America in terms of global education is at least to get their feet wet within global collaboration projects. That gives them more understanding of international issues because these projects are using global issues. They're having that ability to communicate with students across the world. And they're using these 21st century skills. And I will focus on the 4 C's today, but I will also describe what other skills are considered 21st century that we may be lacking in a lot of our schools. But one of the good things about global collaboration projects is that they are using all 4 C's: collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. So the title of this study was called Moving Towards Institutionalizing Global Education. And so the purpose was to investigate how the process of implementing and then planning an institutionalization of global education occurred on a high school campus, a large high school campus, where new pedagogies may be harder to implement than others. Looking at the strengths and challenges of this implementation and eventual institutionalization, and then understand the needs of those teachers who have not done a collaboration before. So there were 3 research questions involved. I wanted to find out what benefits and hurdles high school teachers recognize in implementing and institutionalizing global collaborations. What needs do teachers have in order to be more successful in incorporating global education, and the potential impact of global collaborations across disciplines. Now, even though this program in Global Prize is more STEM oriented, my particular project actually focused on teachers who were not in STEM, and I can kind of explain that in a little bit. So the theory that this study sits upon is Shepard's socio-constructivist theory, which is borrowing parts of cognitive, constructivist, and sociocultural theories. And so cognitive theory says that learning is an active process in sense-making, and that intelligent thought involves self-awareness and monitoring. Constructivism, a popular theory in education, is that knowledge is constructed by the student. So as they grow and develop, they're building upon their experience as they experience it. And also in Vygotskian terms, that we also construct knowledge as a social activity, and we learn more when we do shared tasks or problems. I thought this fit really nicely within global education, since the students are being social, they're building on previous knowledge, and they're also cognitively thinking about it. So I won't really read all of the literature review to you, but I focused on 2 main sections. You could also cover assessment, which I did originally, but in the end, this particular study wasn't about the actual assessment. In subsequent studies, it certainly would be, because assessment is of high interest to me. The first area in the literature review is the 21st century skills. And P21, or the Partnership for 21st Century Learning, created this particular framework that discusses outcomes and support systems that students need to succeed and thrive as global citizens. Within this framework, for the student outcomes are content knowledge, which are your regular reading, writing, and arithmetic, but in addition, global awareness, financial awareness, knowledge of economics, civil, health, and environmental literacy, life and career skills, which include social skills, responsibility, learning and innovation skills, which is where the 4 C's come in: creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And finally, information, media, and technology skills, which are kind of self-explanatory. Technology, which I don't think that our students today have an issue with that. It's important that we leverage the technology as great tools and not just be learning them or using them for the sake of using them. But I think teachers themselves who are not digital natives, who did not grow up using a lot of technology, should certainly be increasing their own knowledge in that area. Here is the framework that was taken from p21.org. You see the internet address there. And so that you can see the student outcomes, which are in the rainbow, and then the support systems as the pools on the bottom. 21st century skills are not necessarily a new idea, but they haven't necessarily been identified specifically in certain areas. So they can also become referred to as higher order thinking skills, deeper learning outcomes, complex thinking. They also give individuals the life skills that help them develop and succeed. And so if teachers can increase their own skills, then they are able to teach them better than they were before. You can see here in Bloom's taxonomy that the upper levels of Bloom's are where the 4Cs reside. And so ideally, what you would like to be as a teacher when you are assessing or designing your lessons or projects is to be in the analysis, synthesis, and evaluation parts of Bloom's taxonomy, whereas usually assessments are on the bottom few. The second piece to the literature review is global education itself. Lawrence Peters wrote a text in 2009, and he just defines global education as an approach that fosters cross-cultural awareness, cooperation, and understanding. Others have interpreted it or to define it as not an actual subject that you study, but a dimension that combines methodology with the content. So it's an extra piece of the regular curriculum. And it's being able to infuse global issues within your curriculum, work towards being responsible global citizens. You know, because we live in such a fast-paced information age, we have so many tools available for teachers to use with their students. And it's really a shame how we are not connecting with other students across the world. And so it's really important, I think, to break down those classroom walls and have them involved in real global issues and using this technology as really great tools. So just images of how students are using technology with apps. And a few examples are Edmodo. They can get Edmodo on their cell phones. I use that in my classes. Editing video on their tablets using iMovie, also using their phones to Skype or use Google Hangouts. So great uses of technology to reach across other countries. Here's a really interesting shot, of different apps that you can use with iPads. Lots of them are also available in the Google Play Store. Not all, you'd have to check. But I know lots of schools are getting iPads or teachers. And this shows you the different apps that you can use for various projects. And if you notice the bottom three lines, global literacy, creative and critical thinking, and communicate and collaborate type apps to use. So for this project, I used a qualitative research design because of the nature of the research I was conducting. I was interviewing teachers, I was observing them while they were doing their global collaborations, and then I was also collecting artifacts of student works. Because I wanted their words, their experiences, those thick descriptions, as it is, a qualitative approach was necessary. And this is considered a case study because all the projects took place on one campus. This is a large campus in South Texas, about 3,000 students. This is also my school, so these participants are my colleagues. I would say the teacher I worked with the most was Miss Smith, who is a sociology teacher and who tends to be a favorite of the students. We worked together collaborating with a math teacher in Mexico, and we were working with the global issue of world hunger. Ms. Hill is the academic dean of the campus, and I chose to interview her because She is the one who is in charge of curriculum, as well as developing staff development days or other professional development opportunities. Mr. Antonio is a colleague in the science department, and we were trying to collaborate with a country in South America in which we compare astronomical observations and look at those patterns and see if they differ in the northern and southern hemisphere. And unfortunately, that connection went cold. But he is still interested in working with another country. Ms. White and Ms. York were, or one is a GT teacher, Ms. York is an English teacher, and they both worked with Chinese students, with their students, basically doing a cultural and information exchange where the kids created PowerPoints of themselves and then exchange those. So it was more like a pen pal thing, but I guess higher tech. Here's a video of me discussing global education with one of the social studies teachers on campus. If you're having trouble hearing, which I am, I'm discussing, or I'm reminding him of how he had attended my professional development session a few months before about the 4Cs specifically.
Especially in geography, and number one is awareness of there being being able to work with I think awareness is the key term that it's really within my own world, like projects. Have you done I have not. The one thing I love is doing some video chat where you have a classroom chat and you have a classroom and trying to set up something like that. Right. There's students. I think that might be more important than not just that awareness, not just the difference in the for day to day when we're trying to
So here's a map that shows the areas that we were working with this past semester. The data sources that I used were semi-structured interviews, classroom observations, emails to the teachers, and samples of the artifacts through student work samples. Analysis ended up going through the transcripts, looking at the artifacts and observations and picking out chunks that were significant and trying to develop these themes and categories. After the interviews were recorded on a digital recorder, they were transcribed using Google Talk to Text. Those were then printed out, and different color highlighters and note cards were used to try to zero in on those categories and themes. And then there was also an audit trail to keep track of interview dates, observation times, and when I collected the artifacts. So this shows you the themes that were developed from the data, and I'll go through those quickly. So the four themes that evolved or emerged from the research was defining global education, benefits, hurdles, and teacher needs. In defining global education, almost all of the teachers mention the word awareness. And you can see some quotes here. I won't mention them to you, but awareness was a big one for the students and the teachers. And so being open to being more culturally aware is important so that you can pass it on to the students. And of course, it's important for the students as our schools become more diversified. Connection was also an important part of the definition in global education as students are connecting to others. In the benefits of global education, the three categories were awareness, risk-taking, and the 4 C's. So awareness came as a benefit as well, because if the students were not already aware, which is in the definition, they became more aware through global collaboration projects. It does make the curriculum more diversified. It can shatter prejudices, as Mr. Antonio said, who's a science teacher. They're going to have more perspective, and they'll be better citizens. Risk-taking may sound like an odd choice as a benefit to global education, but it showed up a few times, and I find that pertinent because you do need those teachers who can be risk takers in order to facilitate implementing and institutionalizing global education. Of course, the 4 C's or utilization of those 4 C's are an important benefit to global education. Ms. Smith was really important, and I worked with her the most because of the World Hunger Project. The World Hunger Project was a really awesome project in which we worked with Mexico, and they had 3 different activities. It's really designed for 5, but we only had time for 3. In the handshake phase, the students created a slide about themselves, and they shared that with their partners from Mexico. We had a classroom group set up on Edmodo. The second activity, which was basically an interview almost, the teacher from Mexico switched up the activity and turned it into a survey, which I thought was really neat. So into a bilingual survey. So the Mexican students started it, and the American students had to double check the English grammar and then collaborate about which were the most appropriate questions. The final activity is where the students had to create a poster that identified world hunger as a problem, or they had to identify a solution. So this slide is just showing you the Edmodo page, one of the final contributions of the project, and then on the right side is a survey sample. This was one of my favorite posters because they had to tweet these. And so on the bottom part, the American students completed, and the top part with the white type, the Mexican partners created. And then they had to use those 2 hashtags. There are a couple of challenges or hurdles to implementing global, and among them are language and technology. You want to make sure that you are culturally aware of what you can and can't say, and then you always need a backup plan for if technology problems occur, and they almost always occur at some point. Planning is only a hurdle when you don't know exactly what is expected. So it's really important that when you're beginning global education, global collaboration projects, that you plan ahead, and it will take some time. But the bonus of that is that once you are starting the project, once the kids are working, you're more of a facilitator and you're not giving direct information. You're not doing direct teach on those days. So I think it's a nice balance. Other hurdles from our experience this semester were testing days. Because of state assessments or PSAT, ACT, AP exams on our campus, students are out for several days, teachers are out for several days. And so since you're already limited in your time for your regular content, it gets to be more of a challenge to include global, not as an extra thing, but as an enrichment. For teacher needs, it's training and time. Just like with any good pedagogy, if you want it to be sustainable, you need to have training. You need to have an effective program and one that is not just a one-shot sit and get. It needs to be ongoing. And so Ms. Hill, the academic dean, is very on board with developing any kind of professional development for teachers and providing them with ongoing support so long as she knows what that is. And of course, with any new thing, time is always going to be a factor. Time to be able to think of new ideas, time to collaborate with other teachers. So it's hopeful that professional learning community time, PLC time, professional development days are used, at least in part, for discussing and planning and assessing global projects. So answering the research questions, what benefits and hurdles do teachers recognize? Most of them knew the definition of global education, and so they recognized the benefits, mostly of the students having a more awareness of others around them, leaders taking a risk, and 21st century skills being used. Hurdles to implementing or institutionalizing would include language and technology barriers, planning the actual product, and limited days due to various testing schedules. So it's always important to have a backup plan to avoid any unplanned stress. The needs of teachers include training and time. And school leadership is a good starting place because it's the administrators who generally plan the professional development. Teachers should voice their desire to learn how to lead projects, and I'm lucky to be on a campus where we are asked what kind of things we want in our professional development. The potential impact, there are several. One is student knowledge, because it's not only content, but it's those additional 21st century skills. What I noticed more was that students were more engaged and excited what they were going to learn. They wanted to be more prepared for answering questions for the Mexican students, and they have a better connection to what they're learning. Ms. Smith, the sociology teacher, really believed that students could initiate change or solve global issues, and as she said, combine knowledge to make the world better and safer. Here's a video clip of me discussing with Enrique, who was the teacher from Mexico. And we were assessing our project in the end.
The experience was too great for me. I have made some goals that I can just in the other next episode. I'm going to take them so I can tell you all of my impressions. Just a minute. I'm back. Did you get the survey that I have made as an assessment for my students about the activity?
Oh, no.
mail. It's right now in your mail.
Oh,
But I have get some of the results, and what I can tell you is that my students were really satisfied about the involvement, and they were very glad to have an activity that they were excited to be able to show their creativity, and that was very nice. Some of the difficulties they had found were about the mobile platform. They were very unfamiliar with it, and that's why, as it was not a usual element for them, they haven't downloaded the apps for their cell phones. So sometimes the answers were very delayed, and we have those time frames where there was no activity in some of the teams. In the assessment form, this is shown as some of the things that we have to take care of, as long as it can make that our times maybe more intensive in case we want. But in the other hand, the fact that it wasn't so fast allowed us to cover some other contents in our curriculums.
they realized that there were other kids like them, but in a different country, you know? So they looked forward really to getting some responses back. And I really loved that you added the whole survey thing. I thought that was really cool. And that was really shows how teachers can collaborate. Well, it was so nice talking to you.
I also think the same. Well, have a great day, Shannon.
You too. We'll talk soon. That was a fun discussion. So the implications of this study are pretty far-reaching. You know, students are really tired of just sitting there. They might complain about having to get up and do something or go find the answer for themselves, but that's really what they're craving. So by putting it in their hands, by making them more responsible, they're going to be more motivated and higher achieving. So it's my hope that this kind of study will be more beneficial to other teachers who want to study global collaboration and to administrators who want to plan professional development for global collaboration projects. So for next year, all the teachers in this study are on board to do it again next year. Enrique from Mexico is all ready to go. We're going to assess the successes and problems that we encountered and address those so that we will not have those issues next year. And global education and global collaboration projects is also slated to be one of the sessions during Staff Development Day. Future research in this area could evaluate a global education program and institutionalizing it in several departments or across several levels of one department, looking at it very long term, or examining the effectiveness of the program itself. So once students and teachers have an opportunity to experience global education, they have the support systems in place, they have backup plans and good templates, then they have the potential to be used all across the curricula and over long periods of time, not just short chunks. Two of the trademark outcomes of the Global Prize program is that of being a global STEM educator and a pragmatic researcher. And I think this study connects to both in a very strong way. In my particular case, I wasn't working with any STEM teachers, but I think that I showed how I was able to use global education across different subjects. And this is the very essence of pragmatic research. I'm trying to do action research here. I'm a teacher in the classroom, and I want to keep it going. So, and I think it's more effective for administrators to hear it from a teacher doing the research than someone who hasn't been in the classroom. The IRB status, as of right now, is still pending certification. And the article regarding the study will be submitted to the International Journal of Global Education, as well as being used, some of the data to be used in future conferences regarding global education and collaborative projects. So, I thank you for joining me today, and please do email me if you would like a copy of this presentation. Thank you.